afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural. Every Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're here with you, giving you the information that you need to make good choices and decisions on how you move about advocating for yourself and understanding where the legal meets the culture, because we know it's a little bit different in our community. So today is no different. We have issues to talk about, information to share with you, and I'm joined by one of our legal experts, Edward Pichado Esquire, because our other legal expert is doing what they do, litigating right now. So a case is active, and he was hoping that the timing would be a little bit different, but we know that he is taking care of the needs of his client and doing what he is called to do as an attorney. So Mr. Russell will shout you out. I'm sure you'll catch the replay later. But Señor Pichado, ¿cómo está?
Muy bien, buenas tardes. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Speaking Legally. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. You definitely, I hope you find the information that's conveyed on this show fulfilling as well as educational. I think it's going to be a very good show this afternoon. Some definitely interesting topics presenting themselves in the news, and we also want to recognize a valuable member of the community that we lost.
Absolutely. And, when we find this information out before our show airs, we always like to pay our respects to our ancestors, those who have gone before, who have blazed the trail. And, it's a reminder, once again, that life is precious, it's short. We just don't know when, where, and how we will transition from this place. But while we're here, we can be intentional on how we live, and we want to celebrate the life of the first Black U.S. Secretary of State, Colin Powell, who was a real measure of a man, as many would say. He was able to admit when he made a mistake. He was able to lead and do the work of all of the positions that he held. So, his leadership within Republican administrations. And then when he saw things going left, he was like, oh, I'm not a part of this. And, supported the first Black African American president of the United States. And, he took ownership of what he did as he led. And this CNN article is one of many that just highlights the accomplishments of an 84-year-old American who has done incredible in the legacy that he has left. And our condolences go out to his widow and his children and entire family and the world. He is a Jamaican descent. So, I definitely have to shout and note that as well. But we want to just pay our respects to him. And, it was a lot. Good afternoon, Kevin. Thank you. A lot to read and just learn more if you didn't know about his career and how he was able to get the position that he had, how he served, how he led, and just the kind of character that he was. And as an attorney, Senor Pichardo, I know that there's some things about our great statesman that you might want to give some insight to as well.
No, absolutely. I mean, General Secretary of State Colin Powell was a fellow Harlemite. He was also born in Harlem, just like I was. He actually, I was listening to an interview by someone who was very well versed in his life, and apparently he wasn't the best of students, because a lot of times when people look at somebody like him and a trailblazer like him, they think, oh, this guy has always done well, always performed at an exceptional level. So, I could never possibly get to the level that an individual like this did if you have any sorts of, flaws. But, actually he was a flawed individual. He was, he wasn't the best student. Apparently he attended CCNY undergrad. For those of you that don't know the acronym, City College of New York, which is in Harlem, located in Harlem. He attended CCNY, and he was kind of, not that, apparently he wasn't all that, interested in being in school until he saw some ROTC members practicing a drill with some rifles, and apparently he was extremely impressed, and that drove him to become involved, eventually enlist, if you will, and become involved in the military. And next thing he's in there. He becomes a war hero after being injured in Vietnam, becomes a commanding officer. And I'll say right here and now, I've never really agreed with everything that Colin Powell has done, because, as someone who considers himself progressive, I found his membership in the Republican Party somewhat of a concern, and some of his positions on foreign policy, U.S. foreign policy, if you will. But overall, I was still proud and considered him a hero in our community, given the fact that, he was the son of Jamaican immigrants and rose to the heights that he did, and he was the trailblazer that he was. And, you can't, dispute that or not recognize that's big. That's big, because I'm sure he found himself in some very lonely places. And like you said, Dr. Grant, he eventually, ate some humble pie and admitted that when he participated in this fiasco of stating that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, which were never ultimately found, but justified a very expensive war and an invasion that, eventually turned into an occupation and saw the loss of many U.S. lives. He recognized his issues with that, although he said that at the time he thought that the information that he was conveying to the United Nations was actually authentic and real. I'll leave that up to history, but at the end of the day, when he chose to endorse candidate at the time, Barack Obama, that was huge for him to be willing to do that, and to engage in that level of solidarity. So much kudos to him. And one of the interesting things I think that needs to be mentioned here is that, as the title of this article is stating, it says he died of COVID-19 complications amid cancer battle. See, so that's important, because when they first announced his death, the family, or what they've said repeatedly throughout, is that he was fully vaccinated. And so some folks are, I would imagine, are using that to say, look at him, he got vaccinated and he still died. The truth of the matter is that he was afflicted with a very serious blood cancer that affected his immune system.
Melanoma.
Mm-hmm. So, people who are vaccinated, you can die of COVID-19. There's no doubt, but the percentage is so low that shouldn't cause you to then say, oh, well, it doesn't matter if I get vaccinated or not. No, yes, it does. You should get vaccinated. The percentage of people who get vaccinated of dying from COVID-19 is extremely low. And the numbers don't lie. The people who are dying are in the hospital and in intensive care, for the most part, overwhelmingly most part, of individuals who are unvaccinated. So I just want to make that point here. Don't use Colin Powell as some crutch, as justification for not doing what you need to do. So, once again, may you rest in power, brother.
Absolutely, rest in power. And, two things that you mentioned before we continue with the conversation today is he saw something that stopped him in his tracks, right? When he saw the ROTC on the campus. And we talked about this before on the show, and a lot of, for the obvious reasons, the issues that we address where the legal meets the cultural, and we talk about our community and how unfair policing practices or crime and such. You can't be what you don't see. That's an old adage, but it really speaks true to what it is that he was able to see with just a drill. It was just the fact that he saw them doing the drill, and may have saw some men of color doing the drill, and it made him curious. And we're losing some of those opportunities when our children aren't exposed to what they can become and see. And just because of who he is and what he represented, there were many men of color who decided to go into the forces, who looked at him as the very thing that he was inspired by. So, where the legal meets the cultural, we just have to always keep in mind that the more we do, the more we expose our young people to, then they have options. They have other ways that they can think about what life can become if they can see it. So, yeah, I just definitely wanted to acknowledge that. And like you said, he did have melanoma, so that is a serious cancer, and it put him in a high risk category. But up until the end, he was in good spirits. He was still doing interviews, and he was still sharing who he was with the world. So, of course, there are replays over and over of his last official interview. And, let it be a reminder that we don't get a second chance at this thing called life. It's one time. So,
No,
how
no,
we
no.
live it and what we do, we really need to be intentional because there are no do overs. And as he rests in power, may we learn lessons from him just beyond being in the military, but the kind of man that he was, the character, the integrity, the hard work, and that from humble beginnings. He wasn't an A+ student. He wasn't, the rock star honor roll, but he learned how to work hard. He learned how to be consistent. He learned how to create disciplines. Not everyone is disciplined by nature. You have to learn how to create those. And as a result of doing that, it led him to become the legend that we celebrate. So,
No,
definitely.
absolutely. Absolutely. Children have to be exposed to things. People sometimes as black professionals of color, you might think, oh, what's the big deal of, me being present, being around, showing young people what we do, how we do it. We think we don't think that that's big, but young people watch things, and you don't know what can spark a lifelong interest. So exposure is a huge deal. When I used to run a high school internship program at the Brooklyn DA's office, one of the things that we aimed to do was to show those young people. It was a summer. Well, we had a summer internship program, and then we had a fall and spring as well. And so we would make sure that all of the professions were on display to these young people, so they on their own could decide, or at least spark an interest in something that could possibly turn into a lifelong career. And I'm talking about from the not just the assistant district attorneys, the attorneys, but where I'm talking about the detective investigators. I'm talking about the court reporters that we had in there, just off the off chance that, look, listen, maybe you're not interested in becoming an attorney and a criminal assistant district attorney, but you may want to become a court reporter, which will provide you with a very good, income and lifestyle. Or you may want to become a police officer. There's so many things that you can be, and do, and young people need that exposure. And I also think about how, you have a lot of professional people that might grow up, say what they call the hood, lower middle class, poor, and they leave the neighborhood. And what that has done in many cases is that, young people no longer get to see that professional living next door. So they don't get exposure to what's out there for them. They think that the only thing that's out there for them is what they see on that corner, and it's sad. And you're so right, Dr. Graham.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it is, and that's why we have to continue doing what we're doing. Even just speaking legally, they're able to see three professionals. Patrick just said his daughter wants to be an
Yeah. What's
attorney.
up, Patrick? Yeah.
So it's important for us to remember that and to remember the influence even that media has. And as a show, there's a certain responsibility of what we share. Their feelings about Bill Cosby out in the world, but you can't negate that the Cosby Show did not have an effect on the amount of attorneys, women who became attorneys, men who wanted to be doctors because they saw the lifestyle. So, aside from all of the other unfortunate parts of what has come from the personal lives, the show itself, as a media production, created role model influences that people wanted to do and be that, to have that kind of upper middle class lifestyle. So that's just our opening for today. We haven't even gotten into the legal stuff, but for the general, we wanted to take a moment to honor his life and honor the significance just outside of the fact that he attained the highest levels in the military, but as a Black man, as a man of Jamaican descent, which is personal to me, just seeing what he did, because Jamaica is celebrating and mourning his life as well as the United States and everyone who was in contact with him. So, on that note, now we get to the challenging part of what we talk about on the show, and that's the hard facts. The facts of what we see going on in the court and how that affects us. This is where the legal meets the cultural, because when we talk about this next subject, unfortunately, a lot of the names and a lot of the cases and a lot of the controversy that we are able to see deals with us. And this is the Supreme Court. Deals a harsh, unanimous blow to police reform.
Yes, indeed. So what's happening here is the following. This past week, the U.S. Supreme Court decided two cases per curiam, meaning that they were unsigned decisions, unanimous, deciding on two police abuse cases, excessive force. One of them came out of the Ninth Circuit. When I say the Ninth Circuit, if many of you recall, those of you who have been watching our show on previous shows, we've talked about the various federal courts of appeal that exist throughout the country. So depending on the geographical region, like here in the New York City area, it's the Second Circuit, and there are other numbered circuits throughout the country. And so you had a case out of the Ninth Circuit and a case out of the 10th Circuit now, and they both, eerily enough, are kind of domestic violence related. One of them, Rivas Villegas v. Cortes Luna, Rivas Villegas v. Cortes Luna, Villegas being the police officer who was involved. What happened here was that the Cortes Luna had the police called on him by, I believe, his girlfriend's daughter or child, saying that Cortes Luna was going nuts inside of the apartment or the house. He was breaking things with some sort of chainsaw. Police get called. They come to the home. Cortes Luna eventually comes out of the home, comes outside. He's not armed, puts his hands up. I'm trying to recall all the facts because I did read the case briefly, the decision rather. And at some point, and this is what becomes important, at some point, they spotted some sort of knife in his pocket. They hit him. I think they shot him with two bean bags because he had put his hands down when they told him to keep it up. Eventually, he keeps his hands up. They tell him to get to the ground. He does. And then the officer puts a knee on him while another officer removes this knife from his pocket. Now, by the time that Cortes Luna is on the ground, he's not posing a threat. He's not resisting. He's already been hit by these bean bags, so he already realizes, I got no wins here, I would imagine. He eventually sues because of that knee that's put in his back. And the lower court, I believe, if I recall, they dismissed the case, but then the Ninth Circuit says, no, this case should be allowed to go forward because there's another case that was decided where the officer put his knee on the person, and that case was allowed to continue. That officer is not going to get to benefit from qualified immunity. He will not be immunized from suit. And if you recall, we did a show where we talked about qualified immunity, and in particular, a law that had been passed by the New York City Council to eliminate that as a defense to a lawsuit. And basically what we explained there is what happens is if In order for you to proceed under qualified immunity, you have to show that it's been clearly established that that sort of police conduct is in violation of the law, and that that police officer was on notice that that type of conduct will be actionable, that person will be able to sue you, and that you should know that you will be able to be sued, or rather that that conduct is illegal, that it's in violation of the law, that you should know that it's been clearly established by previous case law, right? So what happens here is that the Supreme Court takes a look at this case and says, oh, wait a minute, hold on a second. That case that the Ninth Circuit is relying on to allow this case to go forward, that case is not the same as this one. That case over there was much worse, and they go into all the fine points of that other case, and they say, in this case right here, the officer's knee was only on this person's back for 8 seconds, not like the other case. In this case, this person had a knife in their pocket. In that other case, that person was damn near naked, was in their underwear, had been called for a noise complaint versus a domestic violence complaint like this case. And so they parse out all these little facts and they say, no, this officer gets qualified immunity. Now, what's the problem with that? The problem now is that, normally you defer to the lower court to make kind of like those to make those findings on those facts. That's one. Two, it makes it difficult when, someone files suit against the police department, because now, unless you have a case that is factually analogous, damn near the same as yours, unless you have that, you're not going to be able to go forward in a federal court. You're going to have to, in the case of us here in New York, you're going to have to rely on state court, meaning that you better hurry up and get that thing, that notice of claiming within those 90 days, or else you're going to be stuck. And so, this is a problem for a lot of folks who are trying to, or are trying to reform, police tactics and police behavior. Now, the other case is Tahlequah City, Oklahoma versus Bond. Now, Bond is unfortunately the administrator of the estate of a Dominic Rollis. Dominic Rollis died in this incident. Okay. And I just want to clarify something, because this was something that interested me, and it shouldn't, but it does, because, and I think it does more so because of the prevalence of African-American deaths to police abuse and excessive force. In this case, Rollis appears to be white. And so what ends up happening in the Rollis case, also domestic violence related. Mr. Rollis was apparently he was at the home of the ex. He was, he was upset. He was over there causing trouble. I guess he felt like he should have never been made to leave his home. Ex-wife calls the cops, said, hey, listen, he's over here. He's drunk, causing trouble. He's over there by the garage. Please come get him. So the cops show up, and, they're trying to get Mr. Rollis to leave the garage. He's at the doorway. There's a very graphic video for those who would like to take a look at this. It's on YouTube, and some outlets still got him up on the internet. Unfortunate to watch. We don't want to see any human being die. I believe in Black Lives Matter. I do, hardcore. And I say what Black Lives Matter activists all say. Listen, just because I'm saying that Black Lives Matter doesn't mean that I don't care about other lives, and that's the situation here. And so when you look at this video, you see the cops kind of try to get Mr. Rollis to, he goes into the garage. Not only does he goes into the garage, he keeps going all the way to where the tools are. And he grabs one of the tools, a hammer. He lifts it up in the air. He doesn't want to put it down. The cops draw. One of them, I guess, grabs the tase. I don't really get to see that in the video. That's not apparent, but apparently he did. It's in the decision. Eventually, they end up shooting Mr. Rollis 4 times to death. Now,
my goodness.
Now the trial court, the district court, issued summary judgment, meaning they found summary judgment in favor of the city saying, listen, the cops acted reasonably here. Okay. I believe qualified immunity. The 10th Circuit says no, he's not entitled to qualified immunity. This case can go forward because we have the jury should be able, in this case, a jury could possibly decide that the officer's conduct kind of ultimately led to this situation where this force had to be used, and a jury might find that under these circumstances. Now,
Let's pause for a minute because
okay,
it's just hard to listen to and review what's happening here. So the first case, if I'm recapping
okay.
properly, um, when you talk about the fact that he had a knife in his pocket, he was down, he was unarmed, and they're giving the officer justified immunity because what they saw a threat while he's on the ground on your knees in the man's back.
The court said that there's no clearly established law that the officer's conduct was unlawful, that the officer was not on notice that what he was doing was unlawful.
I thought that's what you said, but yeah, I
Okay.
said maybe let me just shake. I'm climbing the ladder here. Maybe I didn't hear that correctly. So
Yeah. So
because the officer didn't realize or was trained that what he was doing was a wrong action, we can't hold him accountable. Basically, we break this down
well,
culturally.
training is a separate thing. The main thing here to understand is that the standard is clearly established. Is it clearly established that the conduct was unlawful? Okay.
That you shouldn't put a knee in somebody's back. That's not
Yeah.
clearly established.
Well, essentially. So what happens is that how do you gauge, or how do you decide what's clearly established and what's not? Well, you look at similar cases. The problem is, let's say you have a unique set of facts that there is no case for. Is the court then going to say that it's not clearly established? That's the problem here. And so what it seems is that the court wants like these very extreme facts to rule the day, meaning that they were basically saying, well, that case isn't like the case where the inmate was made to sit in his or her waist for 6 days. They're setting it up so only the most extreme cases get to get past what's called summary judgment, or that get to proceed to a jury. And the problem is that you can have police misconduct without it being extreme. I mean, it's that's the problem here. And like I said, what if you don't have any cases that are like yours? Does that mean that the officer wasn't on notice? I don't think so. I mean, I think reasonable minds will differ. Okay, so
Mhm.
you have that. So in this case with Rollis, okay, they could have decided that this case not go forward purely on whether the officer's actions were reasonable or not, without even discussing qualified immunity. But what they did was they did both. Not only did they find that the officer's actions were reasonable, but also that they could benefit from qualified immunity, and that the cases that the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals relied on weren't the same as this. And so therefore, qualified immunity. And as the author of this article points out, this hair splitting and this, nitpicking here, it becomes problematic, because if I need to find, and by the way, what's pointed out importantly here is that this was something that was purely the creation of Supreme Court precedent, meaning that many years ago, the court is the one who came up with this qualified immunity defense. This isn't something that's like codified in law. This was something that kind of was created through some precedent, and now it stood as a barrier to allowing people to sue the police department for misconduct. And so it's a serious issue. I mean, it's gonna, and what happens is that, like I said, unless you live in a municipality where that municipal government, or a state where the state government has said no qualified immunity defense here, then time and time again you're going to see litigants who sue for police misconduct get knocked down, because this qualified immunity standard is also a very high standard, and so it's going to be a real problem. It's definitely going to shield a lot of police departments from any sort of legal reckoning. And listen, government lawyers who have to defend the police are definitely going to rely on these cases. And like I said before, these cases were issued per curiam, so they weren't like signed. They didn't. They a lot of Supreme Court decisions have what justices voted in favor of the ultimate decisions, which one didn't. Sometimes, even though they might agree on the result, they might say it's for different reasons. You don't have that here. So what you have here is just a very boom. This is it right here. So a lot of government lawyers I anticipate a lot of government lawyers are definitely going to use these decisions to knock these cases out of court. I think it's also going to have a chilling effect too, because a lot of these cases are also taken on, just about all of them are taken on contingency, meaning the lawyers who take the cases, they look at the facts, they look at the case law, and they say, okay, this is a case that I can take, that I think is at least going to get to the point of getting to the point of a settlement, and get this person some recompense, and allow me to continue to do these cases. But if you figure out that, hey, listen, this case is going to get dismissed, you're not going to take them, you're not going to, these incidents are possibly not going to see the light of day, and officers will continue to do what they do. Unfortunately, if there's no legal repercussions behind it.
That's the challenge that's just disheartening, because we've been talking about reform. So I'm shocked that this was the position of the higher court when it comes to what we're working so hard to disband, like the systemic racism. Like, how do you couch this under there's no clear guidelines on this not being appropriate? Putting a knee in someone's back, like, a kindergartner could see that. So it's just interesting how it continues to play. And it touches on something that we mentioned here on the show. Who are you putting in these elected positions, right? That are allowing the lower courts to have certain mindsets. Of course, we know how the elected body in our judiciary for the country is nominated and confirmed, but it's really just disturbing that we're still fighting this uphill battle on police reform. And what does that look like, and how do you find these cases and be able to really try those who abuse the office that they hold? Because it's not every officer, and we've talked about that on the show. We're not here to ban all police officers. They're good police officers, but the bad apples are getting all the shine.
Yeah, and listen, when I looked at that second case that we discussed, with the gentleman in the garage, it's interesting because because I was reading an article from a local citizen who also had a problem with the killing, and apparently he was coming kind of from a libertarian perspective, because in the video that you watch right before Mr. Rollis is killed, he's saying, "I'm in my house," So, and I guess his ex-wife had disagreed whether that was still his home or not. But it seemed to me as if there was some opportunity there because he was in this garage. There was nobody around him. It was him and these two officers. Now the court seems to come up with some, I guess, some theory that he was going to possibly swing this hammer or throw it. I don't know. I mean, it seemed to me like they could have just backed up, let him kind of calm down, or just stop. And I say all that because I hearken to a situation. I guess it occurred about a week or two ago, where there was a gentleman who was wanted on some warrant for punching his girlfriend, and I guess having an argument or threatening his mom, and he ends up climbing out of a window in his home and climbing onto a tree in Queens.
Oh, yes.
And the officers, they allow him to just stay in that tree until he gets tired or becomes exhausted, and they eventually got him down. And I said to myself, I said, man, that and I
Well,
believe,
well,
Dr. Grant, you were pointing out that it
yes.
wasn't just the police. There was a
No.
local
Life
organization.
Camp.
Please
Yes.
explain. Yeah. What is
Yes.
this
So
organization, by the way?
Life Camp, which is founded and headed by Erica Ford, they're violence interrupters, and they've been recognized nationally for the work that they do on the ground, helping to de escalate violence in the community, as well as situations like this. And the police were open to Life Camp stepping in, and one of the leaders was able to help coax and talk him down from the tree without it turning into another situation where someone gets shot unnecessarily, right? There are other ways to approach these situations. And we know mental health comes into play for some of the cases that we've seen, but it's that level of training. Patrick is in the chat. He keeps saying training, 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 like more training. We hear you, Patrick. Absolutely. It's something that we need to discuss because the same thing doesn't happen across all communities. So if there's no equity in policing and how that shows up across every nationality and every community, there's a problem. If we can't figure out that there are other ways, like these violence interrupters, Life Camp is one of them, and one of the oldest who have been out here putting their lives on the line each and every day, talking, de escalating gun violence, gang violence, being able to really be a support. Here in New York, they've received funding to help not only open up a building, but to deploy people in the community so they know what's really going on the ground before it escalates into a situation where someone loses their life. And it just really saddens me that we don't see more of this replicated because it appears to us that the intent when a black or brown person is in distress or a questionable situation, you shoot first and ask questions later. That's what it boils down to. And that
Exactly.
is why we get so emotional about this because it is blatant and it happens over and over again. And it's not about the fact that there's not crime in other communities. They get treated differently. They talk to them differently. We've seen and shown on this show video of a white person cursing out the cops with a gun on him and speeds off without one officer firing a shot. So when you see the disparity over and over again, when we get traumatized as a community over and over again, this Supreme Court decision just adds insult to injury. How
Exactly.
much must we bear? And yes, I'm passionate about this. I have two young black men that I gave birth to. I'm married to one. I'm the daughter of one. I'm cousins to many. I'm sister to them. Like these are the things that make us very uncomfortable when it comes to trusting the process. So I'm glad speaking legally allows us to break down what's happening and then to let our voices be heard because there are many different ways to advocate for justice. Not everyone is going to be in the courtroom. Not everyone is going to be on the line of the protest. Not everyone is going to write policy, but all three need to happen. It all needs to happen for us to continue to push for the proper reform because you haven't even gone through the other cases and the other parts of this, right? We haven't even hit that yet, but I'm so like annoyed at what we're listening to. It doesn't take common sense, not clearly defined. What?
Yeah, and and with that case in Queens, I had heard that what I had read was that that gentleman was doing what he was doing not only because he was suffering from some level of mental illness, but apparently he had been abused by correction officers, or so he said, while he was in the last time he was in custody. So that's why he was like so deadly afraid of being taken into custody. Okay, and what's refreshing is my understanding is once they were able to get him down and talk him down, they went and got him some mental health assistance,
Yes.
which is what needs to happen here, which will truly deal with whatever it was that was happening at home with his mom, whatever it is that actually happened with his girlfriend or his wife. And I'm sure they, didn't want to see him get killed or even have him go to jail, but instead get help. Because whenever you ask these folks who call the cops in the first place in these domestic violence incidents, well, what do you want to happen? They will say, hey, listen, invariably, I want him or her to get some help. That's what they want. And when officers get there, they have to act as guardians, not as like these, enforcers who are coming to, shoot somebody or hurt somebody who's, in their minds hurting someone else. Nah, that's not what's happening here. You're there to, calm things down in a vacuum of other things not being able to be, rendered or offered at that time. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I know this is to be continued. We have another case that we're going to talk about
oh man.
today. But, having you as a legal expert, having Mr. Russell as a legal expert to help us understand, we- not go past this, because a lot of times these things happen, decisions come down, and culturally, we don't know what's going on. We don't understand, what decisions are being made and how this can affect you or a loved one. And it's important for us to understand and to keep the pressure on for the reform that is necessary, period. Like, it's not a question, should we or can't. There has to be reform. Now, there are going to be many arguments on the table on how it's reformed, but there must be reform. We cannot keep going through this repeated trauma over and over again, because then we get into the situations where what else is in the news? We know now that jury selection is happening on yet another high profile case. But before we go into that one, any final thoughts on this decision that you want to share, Senor Pichardo?
Well, I think it becomes even increasingly important that municipalities and states deal with this qualified immunity issue and making sure that litigants aren't barred from moving forward with their legal claims against these against police departments or against police misconduct. And so, here in New York, we got that one passage of that one law. It needs to get passed on the state level. So, I think all of us should write our assembly persons and senators about that to have the legislature take a close look at that and then pressure the government once it's the governor to sign it once the legislature passes it, so that we can cover the entire state of New York. And that's what's going to have to happen in the meantime until we get some reform on the federal level. Because I'm not saying that there haven't been attempts at reform on the federal level, but right now they're stuck. There's a slim majority in the House of Representatives. There's a damn near deadlock 50-50 in the Senate, with VP Harris being the tiebreaker. So the chances of reform right now, when they can't even get voting rights passed, is slim to none. So we're gonna definitely have to pressure our electeds to do something about this issue, because right now we can't concern ourselves, or we can't rely on the Supreme Court to do what they otherwise should do. I mean, those are lifetime appointments right now, unless President Biden expands the court to allow for more justices. And then that's not a Biden thing, by the way. Solely that I don't. My understanding, that power doesn't reside solely in him. Once again, it's something that would constitute a change that would require legislative approval. But that's all I got to say on that.
Oh, we can't. Hope springs eternal. We'll continue
Ah,
to keep the pressure on, and to all of the advocates and those who have the programs that are educating us and allowing us to know how we can raise our voices in unison. That is where we are apart in playing as far as this show, reminding you connect with these organizations, find out more, find out what they're doing so that you can lend your voice to what you feel passionate about with the reform that is needed for equity in this country. So, unfortunately, we are reliving the trauma of this case and the murder trial of the killing of Ahmaud Arbery and the jury selection that has begun in Georgia. This is in the news, and they're concerned about finding 12 jurors who won't have their opinions biased, their ability to sit on the jury. So, what are your thoughts about this, Attorney Pichardo? Because I
well,
don't know
we
how they're gonna find them.
we I mean, listen, ultimately, I figure a jury is going to be selected. What's happening here is that during the voir dire jury selection process, a number of individuals are either expressing their displeasure with what occurred based on what they've heard about this case, what they've seen, the way it's been portrayed in the media. And yes, the defendants in this case, they have to make sure that they get impartial jurors deciding their case. But ultimately, I figure they will, pick a jury. I mean, they're pretty much gonna have to. Now they're being very careful in the selection process because they want to make sure that whatever happens here will be able to stick, and they don't expose this case to an appeal that causes these individuals, if they are convicted, because we don't know that, if they are convicted, to ultimately get their convictions overturned. So it's important that the judge carefully administers this selection process to make this trial to insulate this trial from possible appellate concerns. It's a we talked about this incident several months ago when it first occurred, or rather when it first got discovered, because for a good while, I think for about a year, that this was kept secret through a number of machinations by local officials. The first prosecutor that looked at this case, apparently that person recused themselves, and then somebody else got the case, and then somebody else after that, and it had to be taken out of the county itself, the local area where this occurred, and ultimately the prosecution of these individuals was pursued, and they were ultimately arrested and prosecuted. So we've come a long way to now getting to the point of the selection of a jury. So now we have to make sure that those jurors are impartial, and the way that's normally gauged is what I said, voir dire, where the potential jurors, a pool of jurors, are asked questions. Can you be a fair and impartial juror? Are you going to look at the facts? Have you commented on this case publicly? What have you seen about this case? What do you know about this case? How do you feel about it? Do you have any, any issues, that will stop you from just looking just at the facts and deciding in accordance with the law? That's that's where it's at. And so, it's interesting because sometimes people will say things during, voir dire to basically cause themselves to be removed because it, not giving the judge a choice, but to say, listen, we're going to have to excuse you because it's clear we can't have you on here, because later on, say in this case, a defense attorney is going to be able to say, hey, this person was clearly biased against my client. So, you get excused. There are jurors reportedly potential jurors who have said, hey, listen, I don't, I'm scared actually to be on this jury, that if we convict these individuals that somebody will come after me. So you may see a sequestration order here where these jurors don't, either don't get to possibly go home, or maybe there's going to be an issue as to the anonymity of these jurors, because some jurors are exhibiting a reluctance to have their identities known. It's gonna be interesting here, though. I
Yeah.
just hope that this family gets justice. I think when you look at this video, it's clear that they hunted this person down. Of course, these defendants, apparently they're claiming that this was self-defense, that they were attempting a citizen's arrest, and Mr. Arbery resisted. I mean, it's mind-boggling that they thought that this gentleman was supposed to surrender to them under these circumstances after they were chasing him down with these trucks.
Police.
It's yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Oh my gosh. It's just like I can't. He was jogging.
Yeah,
He was
yeah, he was
jogging.
jogging. They're claiming that because he went onto some sort of construction site where they were building some new home, that they thought he was a burglar. I mean, it's I think this goes back to this supremacist ideology, which kind of believes that certain individuals can tell others what to do and
I was
not
just gonna
do.
play what he
And
said.
oh, sure.
When I turned around, he took off running into the house. Okay. What did he look like? It's a black male, red shirt, white shorts. I just want justice for my son. I just want them to pay the price to the full of the crime they did. He didn't deserve that because he was a very good young man.
Yeah, 2 months passed. Okay, I know it was a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Hmm. Interesting. Two district attorneys have
Yeah,
recused themselves.
yeah.
Of course, extend our deepest condolences to the Arbery family. We also want to take a moment to thank them. One of the last things you want to do in a circumstance of this nature on a case, certainly that's been around for a period of time, is to ask anybody, particularly a victim's family, for patience. It's difficult to do.
Yeah, very difficult to do and to relive the trauma, because that's what it is. It's the trauma of seeing it. He was jogging,
Yeah,
and he was jogging while black. That was his crime.
yeah. He was
And
driving.
you take it upon yourself because you are the self-appointed law and order of making a citizen's arrest and having a gun. Like, you're not the cop. So it's there's so many levels to this that we're not going to relitigate here on the show today, because of course we're at the top of the hour. But it makes it really interesting when we think about this jury selection and what they're going to do. Will there be a fair trial? Will this family get justice?
Yeah. No. The question is will this family get justice? Because you always, I don't know, you always get a little afraid. You say, oh my gosh, this trial is taking place out in this rural area. What's the jury pool look like? Are these people that are sympathetic to these defendants? Are they sympathetic to the victim in terms of their mindset? Are they going to look purely at the facts? Are they really going to buy this citizen's arrest defense, and that they were and that Ahmaud Arbery was resisting? Are they going to buy into some sort of argument that he should have just been like just stopped and submitted to the authority of these individuals, and what were they intending to do if he did decide that he was just gonna stop? Were they gonna put him in that truck, and where were they gonna take him? I mean, you think about all these things because you think about Emmett Till, you think of the history of black men disappearing and being found hanging from a tree somewhere. You think about all of these things, and you say to yourself, well, what would have happened? What could have happened? I mean, where do we go from here? You're jogging somewhere. Are you safe jogging in certain parts of the country, certain neighborhoods? You always think about that. You don't even have to be in a car anymore, right? You're in a car, you get stopped, you get shot in a car. You're jogging, you get shot. You're not armed, you get shot. When are we not getting shot? I mean, it doesn't stop. It just doesn't stop. Yeah, so
it's more than a notion. It's more than a notion. And to your point,
yeah, and then you got the structural racism where the institutions aren't working. You got an impaired investigation by a police department that one of the defendants was a part of. You got DAs not investigating, claiming conflicts of interest, not properly, upholding their duties and following the law. Family is asking what's happening. Nobody's giving them answers. Luckily at the state level, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation gets involved and does something. So you can't rely on your local institutions. This is what we're talking about when we talk about structural racism. People like to use the term racism and very frivolously. The word, the term racism. That ism connotes a systematic underpinning behind it. Whenever you try to talk about any sort of level of racial, ethnic, any sort of discrimination, you also have to look at whether there's a system behind it to really, cause that to be a serious burden to a group of people. Okay, and that's definitely what takes place here. What's happening here is that you have institutions assisting and aiding and abetting of the taking of black lives. That's what happens here. Okay, make no mistake about it.
Absolutely.
They're all institutions that are in place, and so and that's what we're dealing with here. We're not dealing with single individuals, or I don't like you because you're black. That wouldn't be a problem. I mean, overall, like if it was just you as an individual, but that's not what's happening. What's happening is that you have these larger systems that are, enforcing this mindset and causing people to not only lose their rights, but also lose their lives.
That part. Oh, that's why Speaking Legally is here, where the legal meets the cultural, and we'll continue to explain, share, inform, and advocate so that we don't lose any more lives. And when we do need the proper legal advice, we have two legal experts here that can do that. So thank you, Senor Pichardo, for your very insightful commentary on what we're seeing, and qualified immunity. That's like whoa, it's whoa. So to be continued. This is just a part. The fight continues, and you only are able to participate in making this world a better place by getting involved. Whatever that level of advocacy is for you, just stick to it and don't stop, because there's so much that needs to happen to leave this place better than we found it. So thank you so much. Thank you, Jay Webb. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you to Kevin and Raymond and everyone who is tuned in live. If you're catching the replay, put hashtag replay so we know. But we're here for you, and we're here Wednesdays, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we look forward to being back again with more information that we can share to keep the pressure on. The struggle continues. Bye-bye, everyone.